Now, Mr. Choudary, you're in the UK, and there are major differences between where you are and the United States of America. I mean, just looking at things realistically, let's face it, I don't believe that the United States is in any way ready for an Islamic revolution. Islamic demographics are not the way they are in your country, where you have the number one baby boy's name in London, now Muhammad. The change of the demographics in the UK, change of the demographics in the EU, leads me to this. Do you believe, putting America aside, do you believe that the UK now is ripe for an Islamic revolution?
Yes, I do believe that. In fact, if you look at what analysts are saying, they say that within 20 years, they will reach the tipping point beyond which, Britain cannot avoid becoming a Muslim country because of the demographics and the number of people who are reverting back to Islam. Within 40 years, possibly the Muslims will be the majority. And I do believe as well that in America, if you look at the statistics, Islam is the fastest growing ideology, especially after 9/11, when everyone wanted to find out about Islam. Many people became Muslims. So I think Islam is coming, very strongly in the Western Hemisphere. But I would remind you as well that, in the heart of Europe, in Spain, in Crete, in Rhodes, places in Austria, Switzerland, Islam was actually implemented at one point. So it's not an alien ideology to the West.
Yeah, indeed. But in Egypt, in the last few weeks, we've seen the rise of the opposition which very clearly is the Muslim Brotherhood, the main opposition in Egypt. Do you believe that once the demographics change in the favor of Muslims in the UK, even let's say one day in the US, that we will see a similar kind of revolution in order to bring about an Islamic caliphate in the UK, in the US? So not just demographic change, but do you believe that we will see some sort of revolution in the future in Europe, in the US?
Yes, I mean, what I would say to you is that there are only four ways in which the Muslims could reach power. One of them is for the people to rise collectively, and you can see that has happened, with other kind of systems as well. We saw it in Serbia, we see it regularly in the Middle East. Another kind of way would be by the foreign policy of an Islamic state already established somewhere in the world to remove the obstacles in the way of implementing the Sharia outside of its boundaries. A third way would be by the people themselves electing for the Sharia to be implemented because they become the majority. And the fourth way would be by certain conflict, as you see now in Iraq, in Afghanistan, etc., which could end up with Muslims in authority. So there are a number of ways it could happen. Allah knows best, but I do believe that America will one day be under the Sharia.
Now, here's what I'm trying to understand, because you're calling for a rally in the United States against the White House, against the U.S. government. But what exactly is your problem with President Obama? Because in the last few days, he has called for Mubarak, the U.S. ally, to step down, leading very clearly to what will be the Muslim Brotherhood rising up in Egypt democratically in the parliament. In the last few months, and really since President Obama came to office, he sided more with the Palestinians than with Israel. He hasn't done too much about the Iranian drive to obtain a nuclear capability. So basically, isn't Obama kind of on your side?
Oh, not at all. I mean, he has promised for Muslims to be released from Guantanamo Bay. They're still languishing there, even though for 8 years he's known that they're completely innocent. That came out from, I think the WikiLeaks and certain other documents. And on top of that, he's increased the number of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, so he's a warmonger just as predecessor was. And thirdly, and more importantly, the Muslims don't want democracy and freedom. Democracy and freedom are anathema to Islam and the Sharia. We believe that the problem in the Middle East is not because of individuals like Hosni Mubarak or bin Ali. The problem in the Middle East is that they don't implement the divine law, just as much as they don't implement it in America. So we don't want you to export more of your democracy and freedom to have another puppet in our region, albeit from the Muslim Brotherhood or any other organization. We believe that the way forward in the Middle East and even in America is for us to go back to the divine law, to rule by what God has revealed, and stop playing God ourselves in Parliament.
I would not exactly call President Obama a warmongerer for putting more troops in Afghanistan. He also put a deadline, a timetable on the war there, and is imposing these rules of engagement on troops that they have to actually coordinate their searches with the Afghan militia, which is infiltrated by the Taliban. They can't conduct surprise searches, only shoot after you are fired upon. But anyway, let's just say you are right about Afghanistan, you're right about Guantanamo Bay. I mean, you can't win every battle, But recently, President Obama siding against Mubarak, U.S. ally Mubarak, rise of the Muslim Brotherhood, which wants to impose an Islamic Sharia state in Egypt and around the world, rise of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and possibly in other countries. Aren't you happy about that?
Well, I would say that, foreign policy is about establishing your interests and maintaining them. So they are military and economic interests, certainly in Egypt, which they need to maintain. Why is it that for 30 years the American administration never called for the overthrow of any of these regimes, even 42 years in Libya? And yet suddenly when they are on the brink of being overthrown, they throw their weight behind the masses because they know that that is where their interests lie. I don't believe that it's because he cares about the Muslims in Egypt or any other country. Otherwise, he would not be killing us in Afghanistan.
We are speaking with British cleric Anjem Choudary. The number here, 1-800-848-WABC. Mr. Choudary is calling for Muslims to rise up in the United States. Mr. Choudary, I'm not asking this in a derogatory way. I honestly want to know. You're in the UK. You've led protests there. I've been to some of them where in the past your group has called for death to Tony Blair, death to the Queen, death to Salman Rushdie, down with the UK government. So I really want to know, why in the world are you a free man right now? Why are you not arrested?
Well, I believe that Allah is the protector, and if harm is going to come to me, then no one can prevent that. But if I am to be free, then that is what Allah has destined for me. He said that support my own cause, and I will support you, and I will make your feet firm. So that is what I rely upon. If I am to be in prison, then I don't think that is an indication that I'm speaking the truth. And if I'm not, I don't think that's an indication that I'm somehow paid by any kind of government. I don't think that would be the case if they were banning me, would it?
Oh, well, maybe that's the case. Maybe it's Allah blessing you. Or maybe there's another thing. Maybe in the UK, do you believe that in the UK, that they're living now under dhimmi status, that they're afraid. They're afraid of your protest. They're afraid that if they arrest you and people like you, then Muslims will rise up against the country. Do you think that they're afraid?
I don't think I have that much of an influence in England, although I'll take that as a compliment from you, but I don't think that I have that kind of an influence.
All right, so as of now, what are the latest plans for the protest? When will it take place? Where will it take place? The one in the U.S.?
Well, basically, the banner under which this protest will, inshallah, take place is Sharia 4, and that's the number 4, America. And you can see that the website is up on that, which is .com. And it will be taking place, inshallah, in Pennsylvania Avenue, where I think most of the protests take place. It will be a static demonstration. And we will basically be calling for Islam, calling for Barack Obama and others to embrace Islam, not only as a religion, but as a way of life. And at the same time, we will be issuing a warning that the presence of U.S. forces and U.S. personnel in Muslim countries looking after interests is at the moment very, very insecure. And I think that the Muslims are boiling everywhere around the world. This is something that they should take very seriously if they want the Muslims to think that they're looking after their own interests. So I think it will have both messages, one, a warm call, and also a warning of the continuation of the U.S. presence in Muslim countries. And by the way, my own teacher and Sheikh Umar Bakri Muhammad in Lebanon will be also issuing a fatwa about what the situation is for the Americans at the current time in the Middle East, so you can speak to him about that.
You are calling for President Obama to embrace Islam as a way of life. If you look at Obama historically, his childhood, his background, Obama's father, a Muslim, grandmother Muslim, entire paternal side of the family Muslims. Obama lived in Indonesia, registered as a Muslim, the world's most populous nation, of course, for Muslims, Indonesia. Do you think that Obama is a Muslim?
No, he's not a Muslim. Otherwise, he would not be committing the crimes that he's committing against Muslims in Iraq and Afghanistan. I do believe that the only way for him to save himself in this life and in the hereafter is to embrace Islam. Islam will eradicate all sins. He will be like the day his mother gave birth to him. Otherwise, when we do implement the Sharia, obviously he will face the consequences of a trial under the Sharia court.
Anjem Choudary, former leader of El Muhajiroun, which is allied with Al-Qaeda. Anjem Choudary, the future of the UK. Anjem Choudary calling for Muslims in the U.S. to rise up and impose Sharia Islamic law. Mr. Choudary, thank you for being here on Aaron Klein Investigative Radio.
It's my pleasure.